shattered promises. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Sterling's corner office on the 42nd floor, each drop racing down the glass like tears he'd never allow himself to shed. He stood with his back to his desk, surveying the Manhattan skyline with the satisfaction of a man who'd conquered his world by 32. His reflection stared back at him, sharp jaw, perfectly tailored charcoal suit, the kind of presence that made junior analysts straighten their spines when he walked past. "Marcus, we need to talk." Violet Hayes stood in his doorway, her honey-colored hair damp from the rain outside, her green eyes carrying a weight that made his stomach tighten instinctively. She clutched her purse against her chest like a shield. He turned slowly, his expression carefully neutral. "I have the Singapore call in 20 minutes. Can this wait?" "No." Her voice cracked on the single syllable. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her, the click of the lock somehow ominous in the quiet office. "It really can't." Marcus watched as she reached into her purse with trembling fingers and pulled out a small white stick. Even from across the room, he could see the two pink lines. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against his chest until breathing required conscious effort. "I'm pregnant," Violet whispered, searching his face desperately for some sign of warmth, of joy, of anything human. 10 weeks. I found out this morning and Marcus, I know this isn't what we planned, but maybe it could be— No. The word came out harder than he intended, sharp as broken glass. He moved behind his desk, putting the massive slab of mahogany between them like a barricade. "This isn't happening, Violet, not now. Not when I'm about to make partner." Her face went pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this is fixable." He kept his voice low, clinical, the same tone he used when explaining to clients why their portfolios were underperforming. "I'll pay for everything. The best clinic in the city. You'll be back to normal in a day, and we can move past this." "Move past this?" Violet's voice rose, disbelief flooding her features. "Marcus, this is a baby, our baby. Not some quarterly report you can just erase? Don't be naive." Marcus pressed his palms flat against the desk, leaning forward with the intensity that usually made opponents back down. "You know what my life is like. 18-hour days, constant travel, pressure that would crush most people. There's no room for diapers and daycare in that equation. You said you understood when we started this." "I understood you were ambitious, not heartless." Tears spilled down her cheeks now, and she made no move to wipe them away. "I thought somewhere beneath all this," she gestured at his office, his suit, the trappings of his success, "there was still the man who used to talk about having a family someday. Who said he wanted something real? That was before I understood what it takes to survive at this level." Marcus straightened, his jaw set. "Sentimentality is a luxury I can't afford." "Neither can you. This is the rational choice, Violet. In 6 months, you'll thank me." She stared at him as if seeing him clearly for the first time, and whatever she found in his face made her take a step backward. "You're serious? You actually believe that?" "I'm trying to protect us both from a mistake that would derail everything we've worked for." "Everything you've worked for," she corrected, her voice now steady with a terrible calm. "I was never part of your equation, was I? Just another asset to be managed." Marcus said nothing. The silence stretched between them like a chasm opening in the earth. Violet's hands moved to her still flat stomach, a protective gesture that was somehow more intimate than anything they'd shared in the 6 months they'd been together. "I won't do it. I won't erase this child because it doesn't fit your timeline." "Then you're on your own." The words came out automatically, a reflex of self-preservation. "I can't have this complication in my life right now. If you won't be reasonable, I can't help you." Something died in Violet's eyes then. The hope, the love, whatever it was that had brought her to his office, it flickered and went dark. She nodded once, slowly, as if confirming something she'd suspected all along. "You're right," she said quietly. "You can't help me, because you're not capable of helping anyone but yourself." She turned and walked to the door, her movements precise and controlled. With her hand on the handle, she paused without looking back. "When you finally realize what you've lost, Marcus, I hope the weight of it breaks you the way you've broken me." The door closed behind her with a soft click. Marcus stood alone in his office, surrounded by the symbols of his success, the framed deals, the awards, the view that millions dreamed of, and told himself he'd made the right choice. The rational choice. The only choice a man like him could make. He didn't go after her. He took the Singapore call. He worked until midnight, then went home to his empty penthouse apartment and poured himself expensive scotch that tasted like ash. And he absolutely did not think about the way Violet's hands had curved protectively over her stomach, or the finality in her voice when she'd said goodbye, or the fact that somewhere in the city below, a woman he'd claimed to care about was now facing the future utterly alone because he'd been too much of a coward to face it with her. 5 years would pass before Marcus Sterling understood that some decisions, once made, can never truly be unmade, only lived with, day after hollow day, until fate decides you've suffered enough to deserve a second chance. Marcus Sterling had everything he'd sacrificed for. Managing partner before 35, a portfolio worth 8 figures, invitations to galas where senators and CEOs courted his favor. Yet lately he'd started waking at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling of his penthouse, feeling like a man who'd won a race only to discover he'd been running in the wrong direction. He told himself it was stress. Market volatility, the pressure of managing 200 employees. He never admitted, even in those dark hours, that he was thinking about Violet Hayes and the choice he'd made 5 years ago in his corner office. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. Marcus was at Manhattan, general for his annual executive physical, a perfunctory checkup his insurance required. He was scrolling through emails in the cardiology waiting room when he heard a laugh that made his blood freeze. That particular cascade of warmth and music could only belong to one person. He looked up, and there she was. Violet, moving through the corridor with a little boy's hand, clasped firmly in hers. She looked different. Her honey-colored hair was shorter now, pulled into a practical ponytail, and she wore scrubs that suggested she worked here. But it was her face that struck him. The softness he remembered had been replaced by something harder, more resilient. She'd been forged by fire, and it showed. The boy beside her was small for what Marcus guessed was 5 years old, with Violet's green eyes and dark curls that must have come from somewhere in her family line. He was saying something animated about dinosaurs, his free hand making elaborate gestures, and Violet was smiling down at him with such complete devotion that Marcus felt his chest constrict. His son. The mathematical certainty of it hit him like a physical blow. Violet's gaze swept the waiting room and landed on him. Every trace of warmth vanished from her face. She said something to the boy, Owen, Marcus would later learn, and steered him quickly toward a different corridor, her body language screaming protection and panic. Marcus stood, his legs moving before his brain could formulate a plan. "Violet, wait!" She spun on him in an empty hallway, placing herself between Marcus and the boy who'd disappeared around a corner. "No, you don't get to do this, not here. Not ever. I just want to—" "To what, Marcus?" Her voice was low but fierce. "To apologize? To explain? You made yourself perfectly clear 5 years ago. This complication," she gestured toward where Owen had gone, "wasn't part of your timeline." The words he'd spoken came back to him like poison. "I was wrong." Violet laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You were honest. Maybe the only honest moment in our entire relationship. You showed me exactly who you are, and I should thank you for that. Now I need you to leave." "That's my son." The words escaped before he could stop them. "No." Violet's eyes blazed. "He's my son. Mine. You're a stranger who shares some DNA. You don't get to claim him after you ordered me to erase him." A nurse appeared at the end of the corridor calling Violet's name. Violet held Marcus's gaze for one more burning moment, then turned and walked away, her spine rigid with fury and fear. Marcus stood there long after she'd gone, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Over the following weeks, Marcus became a man possessed. He hired a private investigator, not to intrude, he told himself, but to understand. The report that landed on his desk was the indictment of every choice he'd made. Violet worked as a pediatric nurse, juggling night shifts with single motherhood. She lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Queens, drove a 12-year-old sedan, and had maxed out her credit card 6 months ago. Owen attended public school and had recently been diagnosed with a mild heart condition requiring monitoring and occasional medication that insurance covered partially at best. The numbers in the investigator's report made Marcus's stomach turn. Violet was drowning financially, and it was his fault. He'd left her to face everything alone. He arranged for an anonymous payment to the hospital, covering Owen's medical expenses in full. It was cowardice, he knew, a way to help without facing her anger again. But 2 days later, his office phone rang. "I know it was you." Violet's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. The hospital said a private benefactor covered Owen's cardiology bills. "There's only one person arrogant enough to think money fixes abandonment. I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm trying to help. You want to help? Then stay away from us. Owen doesn't need a father who'll disappear the moment being a parent becomes inconvenient. I won't disappear." Marcus gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. "I know I have no right to ask, but please, let me meet him. Let me try." The silence stretched so long he thought she'd hung up. Finally, she spoke, her voice weary. "You'll break his heart. That's what you do, Marcus. You break things. Then let him know who I am before I have the chance to hurt him. Let him decide." Another long pause. "Saturday. The playground on 43rd. 2 o'clock. You get 30 minutes and I'm staying the entire time. If he gets upset, you leave immediately. Understood?" "Understood." The line went dead. Saturday arrived wrapped in golden autumn sunlight. Marcus found them at the swings, Violet pushing Owen higher and higher while the boy shrieked with delight. Marcus approached slowly, his palms sweating despite the cool air. Violet saw him first. Her jaw tightened, but she stopped the swing gently. "Owen, honey, there's someone I need you to meet." Owen looked at Marcus with frank curiosity. "Hi, do you work with my mom?" Marcus knelt to be at eye level, his throat tight. "No, My name is Marcus. I'm a friend of your mom's from a long time ago." "Oh." Owen kicked at the wood chips beneath the swing. "Are you here to play?" The simple question nearly undid him. "If that's okay with you." For the next 30 minutes, Marcus pushed Owen on the swings, helped him across the monkey bars, and listened to an elaborate story about a T-Rex named Roger who was learning to share. He memorized every detail, the gap in Owen's front teeth, the way he scrunched his nose when thinking hard, the absolute trust with which he grabbed Marcus's hand to show him the cool rock he'd found. When Violet called that time was up, Owen hugged Marcus's leg spontaneously. "Can you come back next Saturday? Roger has more adventures." Marcus looked at Violet over Owen's head, hope and fear warring in his chest. She studied him for a long moment, then gave the smallest nod. "I'd like that very much," Marcus said, and meant it more than any deal he'd ever closed. As he walked back to his car, Marcus realized something fundamental had shifted. The empire he'd built suddenly seemed very small compared to the 5-year-old boy who'd just trusted him with his dinosaur stories. He'd spent years accumulating power and wealth, believing they measured a man's worth. Now he understood that worth wasn't something you could buy or win. It was something you had to earn, one Saturday afternoon at a time. From a child who'd been just fine without you and might someday, if you were very lucky and worked very hard, let you into his life anyway. The road back would be long. Marcus was finally ready to walk it. Redemption's test 3 months of Saturdays had passed, each one a small miracle Marcus never took for granted. Owen no longer flinched when Marcus arrived at the playground. He'd started calling him Mr. Marcus and saving drawings to show him. Progress felt fragile as spun glass, but it was progress nonetheless. Then everything collapsed on a Thursday afternoon. Marcus was in a board meeting when his phone buzzed insistently. Violet never called during work hours. His stomach dropped as he excused himself and answered. "Owen's in the hospital." Her voice was raw with exhaustion and fear. "His heart condition. There were complications. They're saying he needs surgery, and my insurance—" She broke off, and he heard her crying, trying to muffle it. "I don't know what to do. The costs are astronomical. I'm on my way." "Which hospital?" Marcus, I'm not calling for money. I just thought you should know in case... Her voice cracked completely. In case something happens. His world tilted sideways. Nothing's going to happen. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He found her in the pediatric ICU waiting room, still in her nurse's scrubs from her own shift, her face pale and tracked with tears. When she saw him, something in her expression crumbled. The fierce independence she'd wielded like armor for 5 years finally failing her. They're prepping him now, she whispered. He was so scared, Marcus. He kept asking for me, and they wouldn't let me stay. Without thinking, Marcus pulled her into his arms. She stiffened, then collapsed against his chest, sobbing with the exhaustion of someone who'd been holding everything together alone for far too long. He held her, feeling utterly helpless, wishing he could rewrite every choice that had led them here. I'm handling the costs, he said quietly. Don't argue, please. I can't let you just... You're not letting me. I'm his father, and I should have been handling everything from the beginning. His voice roughened. I know money doesn't fix what I did. I know it doesn't make me deserve him. But it's what I have to give right now. Violet pulled back, searching his face. Whatever she found there made her nod slowly. Okay, thank you. The surgery took 4 hours. They sat side by side in uncomfortable plastic chairs, not speaking much, but somehow the silence felt less hostile than before. Marcus bought terrible coffee from the vending machine. Violet dozed fitfully against his shoulder. In that sterile waiting room, the walls between them began to thin. When the surgeon finally emerged with good news, the procedure had been successful. Owen was stable. They both wept with relief. Over the following weeks, as Owen recovered, Marcus showed up every day, not just with expensive gifts or grand gestures, but with the quiet consistency that truly mattered. He read stories in funny voices that made Owen giggle. He smuggled in strawberry milkshakes when the hospital food proved inedible. He sat through endless episodes of Owen's favorite cartoons, just grateful to be present. One evening, after Owen had fallen asleep clutching a stuffed dinosaur Marcus had brought, Violet walked him to the elevator. You've changed, she said quietly. Or maybe I'm finally seeing who you could have been all along. Marcus met her eyes. I was a coward. I built my entire life around control because I was terrified of anything I couldn't manage with spreadsheets and strategy. When you told me you were pregnant, all I could see was chaos. I couldn't see the gift you were offering, and now I see that the only thing I ever controlled was how alone I would end up. He shoved his hands in his pockets. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Violet. I'm not even sure I deserve a relationship with Owen, but I'm asking for the chance to keep trying, however long it takes. Violet was quiet for a long moment. I was so angry at you. For years, that anger was almost like fuel. It kept me going when everything felt impossible. But lately, she shook her head. Lately, I'm just tired of carrying it. I don't expect... Let me finish. She held up a hand. I'm not saying we're suddenly going to be some happy family. You hurt me in ways that don't just disappear because you've been decent for a few months. But Owen deserves to know his father, and you've proven you're willing to show up. That has to count for something. The elevator dinged, but neither of them moved. What are you saying? Marcus asked carefully. I'm saying we can try. Really try. Supervised visits become regular custody. You be a real part of his life, not just Saturday mornings. But Marcus, her eyes hardened. If you hurt him, if you decide this is too difficult and walk away, I will make sure you never get another chance. Understood? Understood. 6 months later, Marcus found himself at Owen's 6th birthday party in Violet's small apartment, surrounded by kindergarten chaos and children hopped up on cake. Owen ran to him immediately, wrapping small arms around his legs. Dad! You came. Did you bring Roger? He'd named his stuffed dinosaur after the T-Rex from his stories. Dad! The word hit Marcus in the chest every single time. Roger's in the car. Should we get him? Yeah. Owen grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the door. Marcus glanced back at Violet. She was watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not love, not anymore. Maybe not ever again. But something softer than anger. Something like possibility. He'd learned that redemption wasn't a destination you reached, but a path you walked daily. He'd never get back the 5 years he'd lost. He'd never erase the pain he'd caused or the struggles Violet had faced alone. His son would grow up knowing his father had once chosen ambition over his very existence. But Marcus was here, now, present, trying, learning that the strongest thing a man could do wasn't control everything around him but surrender to the beautiful chaos of love and let it reshape him completely. As Owen dragged him outside, chattering excitedly about his birthday wishes, Marcus understood something fundamental. He'd spent his whole life building an empire, only to discover that his true legacy was this small hand in his, this chance to be better, this long road toward becoming someone worthy of the word dad. It wasn't the ending he'd planned, but it was infinitely better than anything he'd been wise enough to hope for.